Hey guys, welcome to this edition of Adventures of Malibu and Dad. Mom's here too, guys. We're at the McLean house, and it's a special celebration here at Appomattox, 160 years. So come along with us, guys, as we check out the festivities today here in Appomattox, Virginia, and we just have a good time. Come along, guys, let's have some fun.
We're glad to share the places and the people that we'll meet. Think of the memories we'll have. Exploring hidden history, it's time to hop aboard on the road with Malibu and Dad. On the road with Malibu and Dad.
To get all set up, let's go a little closer. Check it out. All right, guys, so we're at the McLean house. This is the site of the surrender, and they've got some portraying actors up here today, and I mean, they look like the real deal.
Driving the windy, hilly roads of Virginia. I'm from the South, but I'm glad to know.
I was going to help you. Hey, you make those declarations. Yes.
I love the North End.
I got your hat.
I was born and raised in the South.
Okay.
Guys, this is the Appomattox Courthouse. Everybody thinks the surrender happened here. The town is called Appomattox Courthouse, but that's the actual courthouse. The surrender occurred obviously at the McLean home. So absolutely beautiful day here on this 160th anniversary of Appomattox and the surrender. Got a lot of folks coming in. Got a lot of rangers giving stories wherever you go, and we're headed to the 1 o'clock gathering. And I'm going to give a little history and background. And I'm telling you, it is a gorgeous day. So much history, so many folks that we've bumped into. And it's a small community, you know. A lot of Civil War reenactors and people who kind of love Civil War stuff. So I've met a few friends, as you see in the video. I'll share some of the photos, some of the guys. And Mr. Miller, saw him again today. If you're watching this, Mr. Miller, good to see you again, my friend. He was dressed as a Union soldier in the photo. All right, so we're gathering, and we'll listen to the presentation here in a minute.
The war in the East theater is stagnant. In February of 1864, the amount of land that the United States Army and the Confederate armies controlled, at least east of the mountains, was almost exactly the amount of land controlled by the armies the day before the First Battle of Manassas. 3 years, hundreds of thousands of men dead, millions and millions of dollars of property destroyed, and there has been no change. Now, on the other side of the mountains, I need to move more closer to mine. See, I told you I didn't know what I was doing here. Western side of the theater, a fellow by the name of Ulysses S. Grant has achieved a number of strategic victories. Fort Donelson, Fort Henry, Shiloh, Chattanooga, Vicksburg. General Grant has controlled now all of the major river transportation corridors in that section of the country, including the Mississippi, which effectively cut the Confederacy in half. Meanwhile, President Lincoln is having to deal with one hapless general after another. He looks out west and sees General Grant's success and says, "That's the guy I need." He brings General Grant to Washington. offers them command of the entire United States Armed Forces. Congress quickly agrees, and they reinstall or bring back out of retirement the rank of Lieutenant General, highest rank at the time in the Army, 3 stars. That makes Ulysses S. Grant the second man in the history of this country to hold that rank. Who was the first? George Washington. George Washington, Ulysses S. Grant. So are we putting Grant on the same pedestal, equivalent to George Washington? That was the hope of Lincoln and the hope of the United States Congress. No pressure, right? So Grant set off to prove Lincoln right. Started what became known as the Overland Campaign. Richmond is fallen. Lee is retreated. The government of the Confederacy is in retreat. And worse, Lee's headed west. Now, this road you've been walking on, the Richmond-Lynchburg Stage Road, was the main route through this part of the state. If you're headed from the Tidewater, the coastal area, to the mountains, this is the road you came down. So if this is the main road, and you hear that Lee is headed west, what does that mean for you? He's coming here. And if General Lee is coming here, who else is coming here? General Grant. What are you going to do? Let's get at it. Get out of town. Be great if you had friends or family in the countryside, you could go hide out with them. Mr. and Mrs. McLean had just been here for 2 years. Moved down here from a little place called Manassas. Maybe you've heard of that. They didn't have any friends or family in the area. They have 5 children. Mrs. McLean is 5.5 months pregnant with another daughter. What are they going to do? They've got no place to go.
I don't understand all this modern gadgetry. Sequester them. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
I wasn't expecting a responsive reading, but that was good. Mr. Morse, who is a good friend of mine and has developed a wonderful telegraph, has told me that at some time there was going to be the possibility that the voice, the human voice, would be transferred over his telegraph wires, that people would be able to talk to each other at great distances. I thought he'd spent too much time in the chemical lab. He also told me that there will be a device whereby the voice would be amplified and many people could hear you easily. And lo, it has come to pass. So we use this strange device, telegraph, close-in telegraph, so that you can all understand easily what we have to say. It will be for you to decide if what we have to say is worthwhile, but you'll be able to clearly hear whatever we say. General Lee. If you're in the back and you can't hear, move up somewhere that you can. It's important, using this, it's important that you hear what we have to say.
You have to step closer to the mic, please.
You want me to chew on it? Would you like me to hold it for you? Oh, no. Actually, I couldn't do that. No, not going to do that. Never mind. Okay. I'm going to talk as loud as I can and keep my face to this contraption here, which means I'm going to tell you after we're finished would be the time to use your little devices to take images. April 2nd, 1865, the siege of Petersburg was broken, as I had predicted it would be. I had told President Davis, once it becomes a siege, it's only a matter of time. April 2nd, the night of the 2nd, we evacuated Petersburg and Richmond. All the roads out of Petersburg, Bermuda Hundred, and Richmond all converge on a little place called Amelia Courthouse. We had pre-planned for this day. We had pre-planned for supplies and food to be at Amelia Courthouse. All these different roads would bring all the troops from Richmond and Petersburg together for the retreat down the Richmond-Danville rail line, which runs southwest to Danville, and from there the plan would be to join up with Joe Johnston's army in the Carolinas. With that size of an army, we thought we had a chance to defeat Sherman and then turn and deal with General Grant. Sounds like a fantastic idea, but we were going to take that chance. In any kind of military operation, especially like this, the best plans will go, once we start moving, things go wrong. When we arrived at Amelia Courthouse, the supplies, the food, was not there. Now, when we left the 2nd, now it's the 4th, the men had been on half rations in the trenches of the siege, so now they're, not only that, they're exhausted and hungry. I have no food for my men. The troops from Richmond had not quite made it to Amelia Courthouse. I made two decisions that I may be criticized for. One, send foragers out into the countryside to find food for our soldiers. And two, to wait for the arrival of the troops from Richmond, the Home Guard and the Richmond Guards, to add to the army so we could all move out together. By doing that, I lost the advantage of a head start. I lost the advantage of time. As you know, once time's gone, you can't get it back. We began a night march to retreat out of Amelia Station. We turned on the Richmond-Danville rail line and discovered it was blocked by Union troops. So that direction that we were planning on going, now that's gone. We turned more to the west, and we're heading towards Farmville. At Farmville should be rations. We've made arrangements now for rail cars full of food to come to Farmville. Now, with any kind of movement of an army, especially over the roads we had, especially encumbered with wagon trains of government supplies that showed up unwanted, and the roads being wet and muddy and crowded, imagine we're trying to move all this army down these roads in a timely manner. It does not work. My rear guard got separated, a large separation between the main body and the rear guard, and at Sailor's Creek, I lost 1/4 of my army, killed, wounded, and captured, including my son, Major General Custis Lee.
9 generals out of my army were captured. Or we moved on towards Farmville. We did night marches, whatever we could to make up for time that was lost. At Farmville, we did find rations. We began to issue those rations out as soon as troops started coming into Farmville. Right behind the last of my troops was the advance of the Union Army. So unfortunately, we're being pushed out of Farmville to the west. From the east is the Union Army moving into Farmville, fighting with the rear guard of my army. So some of my troops did not get any rations, and we moved on. Now this is the night of April 7th. April 7th, I'm across the Appomattox River at a place called Blanton's Forge. And I'm in a little, I would honor it by saying it was a shack. I'm in some sort of structure I'm using for a temporary headquarters. And that's the evening of April 7th.
For 11 months or so, we have been stretching our lines around Petersburg, encircling Lee, sidling every opportunity we got until we had sidled around to where I could cut off the railroads going into Petersburg, Lee's lifeline. We finally were able to do that April 1st and 2nd. Lee's lines are cut and he evacuates Petersburg and Richmond. Now all of this, nearly for a year, when I'm at City Point, Virginia, at my headquarters, my greatest fear was that I was going to be awakened some morning and told that Lee has escaped during the night. He's withdrawn and gone south to join, by this time, Joe Johnston. That didn't happen, but he did, as I anticipated, evacuate when we cut off his rail lines. We had completely encircled Petersburg, and he had to evacuate or be captured. And we began a pursuit. This is on April the 2nd. I met with President Lincoln, who had come down at my invitation to my headquarters at City Point. And I met him in Petersburg just before I left to join the Army. And I asked him before I left, is there any instruction that you have for me, any requests? And he said, just let them up easy. Whenever you catch them, and I had told him it would be days, probably, perhaps weeks. He said, General, just let them up easy. Send them home. They still got time to get in a crop in their little farms that they've got. Send them home. I bid him farewell and went to rejoin the Army. The Army of the Potomac and the Army of the James. The Army of the James went faster with Phil Sheridan and General E.O.C. Ord. They went south and got in front west of the Army of Northern Virginia. The Army of the Potomac was coming from their east side. Now, as General Lee told you, they got as far as Farmville. They fought the Battle of Five Forks and lost a major battle, and many men captured and wounded. Then he got to Sailor's Creek on the 6th, lost, I'm told this early on, about a third of his army, I think 9 of his general officers, as he said, including his own son. And he had gotten almost here, he'd gotten to Farmville. Now, I must compliment General Lee in that he told you to meet the courthouse. He stopped for a day to try to get his starving troops some food. He had an 8-hour march on me, a good day, which is critical in moving an army. But General Lee, the military man, became General Lee, the humanitarian, and gave up that lead, and he knew what that could mean to try to feed his men. Unfortunately, there was no food to be had, and he moved on. We got into Farmville and his rear guard was still in the city trying to unload food and rations out of boxcars when my advance guard was going in the other side of the city. So they had to beat a hasty retreat. And I went into the Prince Edward Hotel and set up a headquarters. It had obviously just been a hospital. And as I'm in there, letting the Army know where I am, I was brought a tall, spare, careworn colonel of a Virginia regiment. And my staff knows me well enough that they know of the many people who request to see me, who should get in to see me. And this man they brought to me. And I asked him, state your business, and he said, well, General, I grew up here in Farmville. My family built this hotel. This is my home. And as we were marching past the hotel this morning, I realized that I'm the last man in my regiment. And I thought, I want to go home. And I did. I'm home. And I'm surrendering myself to you personally. I listened to what he had to say, and I thought, well, that's one more Virginia regiment out of the fight. And they are fighters. And I left instructions. Well, I told him, if you will not take up arms again against the United States and you obey the laws here, then you will not be disturbed. And I left orders that I had better not hear about any damage being done to that hotel or it burns down. I made that clear. I had also heard about Sailor's Creek the day before on the 6th and what a loss that was. And those two circumstances prompted me to call for pencil and paper. I thought it's time to appeal to General Lee and ask him to end this. Let's stop the killing. And I began to write, and I sent General Lee a message at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon on April the 7th.
As I mentioned, I was at Blanton's Forge on the evening of April 7th. And before I tell you what the message was, I want to tell you how expensive it was to send messages through the lines, particularly this time. When my army's in retreat, everybody's on alert, everybody's tense, they're exhausted, they're tired. And my rear guard facing the advance guard of the Union Army, not very far away, watching each other. It was very dangerous to send messages. And it surprises people when I tell them neither army had big white flags to signify truce or surrender. Those were only in paintings from Europe. There wasn't hardly anything white in either army by this point. From April 2nd, now it's April 7th, roads are muddy, it's rained, they're tired. Both armies have been marching, my army day and night. What can you imagine is going to be white in these armies? So it was very dangerous. The first message that he sent, the one he just told you about, he sent it by one of his most valued staff officers, Colonel Seth Williams. Now that right there told me this has got to be important, because Seth Williams was my adjutant when I was superintendent of West Point. He was not only a friend of mine, he was a friend of the entire family. And so he's sending Seth Williams out here to deliver this message when he could have sent an obscure lieutenant and some orderlies, and if they got shot, well, in our Army parlance, we can be replaced. They can be replaced. But Seth Williams was a very important part of his staff. But he comes up to the edge of his picket line for the advance guard, and on the rear guard, an officer and a sergeant see what he's doing and step over their gun emplacements to walk out halfway and meet them.
Some of the pickets on the northern side didn't recognize what was going on, fired on these two men, and wounded the sergeant. They went back. A senior officer on our side waved them off, told them forget it. He went to another area. This time, now it's getting twilight. It's getting kind of dark. This time, my pickets didn't recognize what was happening, fired on them and wounded one of his orderlies. The message finally was passed on. I got it at 10 o'clock at night. I'm reading the message in this little shed. Colonel Venable is standing behind me with a candle, holding it up so I can read this message. General Longstreet, James Longstreet, sitting at a table. I'm being charitable saying it's a table. He's sitting there at that table, and I read the message. And essentially it says, the time has come. I'm asking for your surrender of your Army of Northern Virginia. Any blood that's shed after this essentially is on you. I read this message. I hand it to General Longstreet. He looks at it, hands it back. 2 words, not yet. I look at Colonel Venable. Now, I knew he read the message over my shoulder. And I said, well, Colonel Venable, what would you do with this message? He says, I would answer no such message. And I said, Colonel, it has to be answered.
Late in the night, early in the morning of April the 8th, the Army's getting up, shaking itself awake, dousing campfires, getting prepared to move on the march. And I got the reply to my first message to General Lee. He didn't get mine until about 10 p.m. the night of April the 7th. I got his reply perhaps 1 o'clock in the morning on the 8th. And he said, well, first of all, he said, I don't agree with you as to the necessity for my Army to surrender. But if we did, what would be your terms? And that chagrined me no end, because he knew I cannot treat for peace. All I can do is tell him, lay down your arms, not take them up again against the United States, and that's all I can do. I cannot get into political matters. I cannot discuss terms and conditions of surrender. The only condition is unconditional surrender. I cannot treat for peace. And I sent that back to General Lee. Now, I should like to point out to you my status at that time. When we left Petersburg on April the 2nd, I had ordered 7 days' rations to be transported in the supply wagons. So we left on April the 2nd with 7 days' food for the Army and forage for the animals. On the 5th of April, the evening of the 5th, I was with the Army of the Potomac, and George Meade is in command. He's been hit with a bad bout of dysentery. He's got the trots. And it's hit him so bad that he can no longer ride his horse. He's actually riding in an Army ambulance. So I got a note at about 8 p.m. on April the 5th from Phil Sheridan. Now, he's with the Army of the James, and they're in front of Lee. So we're about to get Lee in a vice grip between the Army of the James on his west and the Army of the Potomac on his east. He left Richmond with about 50,000 men. After the battles at Sailor's Creek and Five Forks before that, and with desertions draining off, as I told you, the colonel at the Prince Edward Hotel, who said, I'm done. He's down to about 20,000 men by best reckoning. Now, on the 5th, Sheridan had sent me a note, I wish you were here with me. Well, that's all it took. Because I know that Meade's abed in an ambulance. The Army and the Army of the Potomac is moving quickly. The Army of the James is in front. and I got my staff of about 12 people. At 8 p.m. it's dark, and we began a ride across country in the dark, which was greatly concerning to my staff because remember now, Stonewall Jackson was shot in the dark by his own men. General Longstreet, a year later in almost the same place, was shot riding with his staff in the dark by his own men. We've got two armies chasing a third army, and everybody knows the end is near, and they're prone to shoot first and see who they shot. So my staff was really concerned about riding through the Virginia dark. But we went, and I joined Phil Sheridan, got there about 10:30 on the night of April the 5th. Now when I did that, I left my personal van that's got my clothing in it. So when I got to Farmville on the 7th, I have not bathed or even changed my clothes, not even my underclothing, since April the 1st. I'm absolutely filthy. I stink, I'm wretchedly filthy, I'm muddy, and I'm not in a presentable situation. But I sent General Lee that note. He responded and said, I don't see where I agree with you, but what will you do for me? And I sent back his reply. And we began moving because we want you to remember that even though General Lee and myself are exchanging these notes about a potential surrender, the Army of the James, the Army of the Potomac, and the Army of Northern Virginia are still moving in a deadly military minuet and a slow-moving ballet across this Virginia countryside, and the war is still very much alive. But he had said, what are your conditions? Now, I replied to him, this is the morning of April the 8th, that I can't treat for peace, and the only option you've got is to surrender. And then we began to move on further toward past Farmville toward Appomattox area. And General Lee replied,
I take criticism for asking for terms. There's a reason for that. All these men that are with me in the Army of Northern Virginia, many of them since the beginning, since I took command in June of 1862, look to me to take care of them. And my concern, number one, what's going to happen to my soldiers? If I surrender this army, what's going to happen to them? I wasn't too concerned about me. I wanted to know what's going to happen to are they going to be all packed off to prison camps? Are they going to be put in a big, like they call a punch bowl formation, big deep valley, and guards put over them until they can haul them off to prison camps? What is going to happen to my soldiers? And we knew from newspapers from the north, from what politicians were saying in the north, they wanted all the senior officers, me number one, to be put in irons and taken to Washington City to be showed off in a parade down Pennsylvania Avenue, and then hung for treason. So, as the commanding general of these soldiers, I wanted to know what was going to happen to them. The message that he sent found me on the stage road moving in this direction to Appomattox. It was a nice day. The message became very expensive. My rear guard misunderstood. The orderlies that were bringing the message from General Grant shot and killed 2 men. 2 of those Union soldiers trying to deliver the message. This was not unusual. This happened quite a bit, more than you would think. But it was the price of getting these messages through. The message arrives, I read it, I sat down on the side of the road, wrote him a reply. This is April 8th. afternoon of April 8th. And I send this message to General Grant. Then we move on to Appomattox. And by that point in the evening, I arrive at a hill not too far from here, a couple miles away, where I've established my headquarters. My headquarters was my staff, myself, our horses, our saddles, and a campfire. That's my headquarters.
Well, during the 8th, General Lee replied to my message and said, you must misunderstood. I didn't mean the Army of Northern Virginia. I meant the Confederate armies not under my immediate command. I thought, well, who do you think I'm talking to? I want the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia. And as I said before, my terms are simple: unconditional surrender. I cannot treat for peace. So you must surrender the Army. We kept moving. By this time, late in the day, on April the 8th, I have gotten to Curdsville, and there's a family with a double house that I stayed in the second floor. And by this time on the 8th, as we are moving, I have developed a sick headache, a migraine headache, the worst I'd had. My doctor tells me, I want you to go back to Washington City. He was in fear for my life. And I told him, no, I'm not leaving the Army. There was a fellow downstairs playing the piano, beating on it. Now, you should know, to make things worse, I'm tone deaf. All music is just noise to me, particularly military music. And this fellow downstairs took advantage of the family's wealth. They were well-to-do. They had a piano, but the way he was banging on it, it was a piano. And they're all singing, officers are singing, and I'm pacing the floor upstairs saying, I can't stand the pain. And I'm telling John Rawlins, my chief of staff, if I could just, in exasperation, with these notes back and forth between Lee and myself, if I could just sit down with him man to man in an hour, we could work this out. And Rawlins knows that the President Lincoln has told me not to do that. General Lee appealed to me on March the 3rd to meet one-on-one and talk about the end of the war. And I had passed that on to President Lincoln, of course, and he came back and said, you are not to do that. You are to solely stop the fighting, and then other matters beyond the cessation of hostilities, I hold entirely in my hands. And I understood that message. So Rawlins is reminding me, he said, that will not do. That will not do. And I'm saying, I've got to meet with him. I can't stand the pain. I just want to meet with him and stop it. And Rawlins is saying, that will not do. Do you want me to stop the fellow downstairs from playing and beating on the piano? And I said, no, leave him alone. They're just letting off steam, and his stopping the piano won't help my headache. So they put mustard plasters on the back of my neck, mustard plasters on the inside of my wrist. I had my feet in a pan of hot water with mustard plaster in that to stop the headache, and I'll tell you, they don't work. And I sent my message on to General Lee. He sent a message back to me that said, well, I'd like to meet with you between the lines at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I said, well, I can't do that. That won't do any good. And I went over to Meade's headquarters a few hundred yards away and had some coffee trying to get the headache to stop. And I called for Cincinnati at about 4 o'clock in the morning, hoping that riding in the cool morning air would stop the headache, and it didn't. And that's why you see me dressed as I am. Private's blouse, only shoulder straps to indicate my rank to the Army, no spurs on, not even any hat cords. Wasn't expecting to meet General Lee that day. But I sent back a message to General Lee and said, I will not meet you at 10 o'clock between the lines. It will do no good for us to talk. I cannot treat for peace. The only thing that can be done is you to lay down your arms. And after trying to drink a cup of hot coffee, I sent that to General Lee.
The night of the 8th, my headquarters on top of this hill overlooking Appomattox Courthouse. I had my last council of war with my senior officers. Approximately 11 o'clock. I had General Longstreet, General Gordon, Fitz Lee, my cavalry commander, several other officers, and my staff officers. And I already told you what kind of headquarters I had. I stood around the campfire. Longstreet's laying on a blanket. Some of them are leaning up against trees. And I go over all these messages that would pass between General Grant and myself. I go over our situation. At that point, we're guessing at how many troops we have. In a retreat like that, it's impossible to keep track of how many men you actually have. So we're guessing at that. What are our options? Can we head down this road and make it to Lynchburg? Are we surrounded? Now, while I'm talking, you can look out and see campfires all around this area, off in the distance, campfires in a big, almost a big circle, like a horseshoe. Those aren't my Army's campfires. So that's telling us something. So it was decided we were going to do one last chance to escape General Grant. General Gordon, the cavalry, and the artillery are going to move down this road and across these fields and try to force an opening on this highway, this turnpike, to get to escape this pincer movement that General Grant was talking about. If it was cavalry, we could brush cavalry aside. If it was infantry, and it's all over. Gordon moved out first thing in the morning, about 4 o'clock, 4:30. We hear some firing and all. I have come down the hill and I'm down near the creek back there, and a rider comes up and says that General Gordon sends word he's fought his men to a frazzle. Unless he's reinforced, he can't make any progress, which meant to me that infantry's there. So I made the decision. I'm going to meet General Grant. I'd already sent him a message. I was going to meet him at 10 o'clock on the stage road, and at that time I would surrender the Army. At 1 o'clock that morning, I had changed my uniform. I'm wearing a full dress uniform. It's got the gold braid on the sleeves. First and last time I wear this uniform. I had the sword belt, the sash, the beautiful sword, my what I would call my dress spurs. That was at 1 o'clock in the morning, and one of my staff officers said, "Why are you dressed like that?" They also were shocked I had a white shirt. Probably the only white shirt anywhere within 50 miles. And as an old Virginia gentleman, you come prepared. I said, I have to go see General Grant. If I go see General Grant today, I will probably be his prisoner, and I want to look my best. So at 10 o'clock that morning, I had traveled back down the stage road this way to my rear guard with my staff to meet General Grant at 10 o'clock on the stage road. When we arrive at the end of my rear guard and now the Union advance guard, we come out into the open. We've got something sort of white to show that we're there for a treaty or passing messages. There's skirmishers coming towards us from the Union lines. When they see us, they stop. They send an officer up there. He very politely says, "Why are you here? What are you doing out here?" I'm sure none of these men had ever seen General Lee out at the rear guard with a flag of truce. We tell him what we want. I'm here to meet General Grant. He leaves. Another senior officer comes out they tell me that they don't know. They give me a message that is the message that General Grant sent me, telling me he's not going to meet me. He's not going to be there at 10 o'clock. Well, now that the decision has been made to surrender my army, I want it over with. I want it done before anyone else gets killed. So I'm frustrated. Miscommunication, misunderstanding of a message or something, and now another delay. At 10 o'clock, I could surrender the army and it would be done. I wad up the message and throw it at Colonel Taylor. Back there. He doesn't talk to me right now. And I called Colonel Marshall over to send another message, specifically using the word surrender. I send that back. I get a message from General Meade. Now, you remember you said that General Meade was ill, which is true. I was surprised by the message because General Meade and I were friends all the way beyond the Mexican War. He was friends not only of me, he would come to the house when he was in Washington City. And he says he's been ordered to attack and he can't stop the attack. So I sent another message back and I said, read what I'm sending to General Grant. So finally we agreed to a 1-hour truce. And Meade sends another message and says, I don't know where General Grant is. If you send that copy of that message to different points in the line, it will reach him. And so that's what we did.
As I said, I had called for Cincinnati. He's a big fella, 17 and a half, 18 hands high, big stallion, 3rd round. And he was prancing and he sensed action somehow. And the Army, again, shook itself away and began moving toward Appomattox. Now, I started out on the Lynchburg-Richmond Road, had about 12 staff. As we moved in that direction, we encountered some Confederate forces in numbers and strength and had to change to the Farmville-Lynchburg Road. So when I made that change, that confused the armies, my clerk, to write them, and he knew the import of the document, and his hand was shaking so much, he said, I can't do this. So I said, well, get Ely Parker. He was a colonel by then on my staff, full-blooded Seneca Indian chief, a lawyer and an engineer, and I'd gotten him on my staff. Fine hand. And he got his pen staff out to sit down and write the terms of surrender, and
they don't have any ink. I turned to Colonel Marshall that's with me, and he has a traveling rosewood inkwell. He always carries with him. He's my secretary. He's supposed to. So we loaned the ink to Ely Parker. Of course, the other thing that Colonel Marshall tells me is that we don't have any paper.
so I said, I've got paper. So the point of General Lee and I emphasizing this with you is that the terms of surrender and his agreement are written with Confederate ink on federal paper. And true in every sense of the word coming together.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Folks have been out here on this beautiful day and observing such a significant day in our history. It's a weekday, and we're so pleased you're here. Thank you. You keep our history alive. Enjoy your park.
All right, guys. Well, that was the day here at Appomattox. We had a great time. Hope you did too. It was a great speech. What I really enjoyed about the day was, You got a lot of tidbits you never knew about in history. These guys were telling us about at the end, which was really cool. But I hope you had a great day. We had a great day. Love you guys. Get out and adventure, man. This was a great time to get out and adventure. The weather was fantastic. Malibu had a great time. Mama had a great time. Guys, thanks for coming along.
Malibu's tired.
Malibu is tired, and we're going to go get something to eat. So, guys, thanks again. We love you. Till our next adventure, guys. Bye-bye. Take care.